I would like to go ahead and hand it over to Hugo to lead this session. Thank you, Hugo, for your leadership in pulling this wonderful team together and thinking through these dynamic conversations. Thank you.
I want to welcome you. We have begun organizing this session in November with Véronique Chable. She is not here today. She had an emergency, which is she works at INRA in France, the Agronomy Center, Research Center, and she's very involved with the vegetable and grain growers in Bretagne. I had the pleasure of meeting her in 2018, my very first conference of the Organic Seed Alliance, and she had come in from France and 2020 with a colleague, and in 2020 she came with a couple of colleagues. So we're going to hear. She asked Corentin to share the experience of Colcos. When I approached Véronique and I asked her if she was interested in organizing this session with us, we looked at what would be the issues that would be addressed in Europe with Corentin, Riccardo, Maria, and Véronique. There's already a lot of discussions that are taking place at the European level on biodiversity, participatory plant breeding, and the seed industry. And we're trying. It's important. It's to create a bridge, to build a bridge between our colleagues in Europe and our experiences here in North America and Quebec. It was also an opportunity to expand the discussion with other networks in the United States. And I see that Anna is here. I spent an hour and a half with her talking about these Spanish-speaking networks in Mexico last week. For the general theme of this discussion, it starts from the observation that a number of collectives in North America and Europe are involved in research and development projects to develop new varieties, create very heterogeneous populations, but there are common challenges among those experiences. For example, in vegetable seeds, it's still quite difficult to supply professional vegetable growers, market farmers, with the volumes of the varieties that they need and with the adequate quality for their needs. In terms of grains, there's a need for special equipment to do selection, to adapt the equipment to the harvest and processing. Discussing this with Véronique, she wanted to concentrate on the economic dimension of these collective projects because she was noticing that there was less and less funding for R&D, which is used to support participatory plant breeding in the field. At INRA, funding for organic agriculture for seeds is being redeployed to biotechnology and greenwashing. And she was seeing that there is a challenge for stabilizing these projects over the long term. And that one solution for these farm collectives and these different territorial collectives is to work towards autonomy, to be autonomous from that funding, independent of that funding. Those comments are designed to basically set the table. We're talking about regional dynamics, supplying farmers. How can these, how are participatory plant breeding projects working out on the in the economic sphere, and what are the prospects for these different networks. Glad that Benita and Anna have their cameras on, and I would invite all the others to do so as well, if your bandwidth permits, since we're a small group. Be nice to see you, and please don't hesitate to use the chat or to raise your hand virtually if you have questions. So the way we'll work is we'll do a go around, and I'll ask each presenter to say a few words about themselves, why they've come today, and then we'll look at the three themes: territorial dynamics, economic viability, and commercial viability, and thirdly, what are the prospects for these collective action networks, these regional seed networks in a context of limited funding and capacity. Thanks very much. And I'm looking forward to carry on the discussions with you. So just say your name and say where you're located and which time zone you're in, and maybe give us an overview of what you're going to say or what your interests are. We'll start with Corentin.
Bonjour, hola, hello. Donc je m'appelle Corentin Hecquet. Je suis le coordinateur du réseau Meuse.
I'm Corentin Hecquet. I'm the coordinator of farm seeds for my region. I live in Belgium, an hour from Brussels, between the city and the country. Do some research on seed issues and seed networks from the social sciences perspective. So I combine research with so I'm working both theoretically and practically at the same time. Marie-Claude. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marie-Claude Comeau, and I own La Radicle Farm, which is organic seed production farm. We produce under contract. It's a 12:15. I just finished lunch, and so I'm here to share our experiences with you within the province of Quebec. Thanks, Marie-Claude.
Bonjour, bonsoir. Je suis Maria Carrascosa.
Maria, je pense pas qu'on t'entend pas.
Non? Non?
Okay, so you can't hear us.
Étrange. Ok, vas-y, continue.
Go ahead, keep going, Maria. If you're speaking in French, that's okay. I mean, speaking in French, is that okay? Good. Maria Carrascosa. A bit tired, it's Friday, but happy to be here with you. I unfortunately couldn't participate in your meetings to date, so this is my first time. I live in Meliana, which is a village near Valence, in Spain, Valencia, that is. And I'm part of the movement of the seed networks movement in Spain. I've been involved for 20 years. I'm doing my coordination. I'm working with the networks in southern Spain, and now I'm working with an organization for development of different types of projects in the agricultural transition.
So you also work with the municipalities in Spain, right? Yeah. So that's under your yeah. Well, that's one of my projects and the organization where I work. So the researcher is one, and that's basically it. So yeah, thank you so much, Riccardo.
Bonjour, Hugo.
Hello, Hugo. My name is Riccardo Bocci. I am the director of Italian greenfield. It's called Rete Ciudades. I'm at the office right now. It's a little bit late. Back home, it's also 6:20 in the evening, and I am based in Florence, close to Florence. And I also live close to Florence in a rural area. And it's a pleasure to be with you. Even if it's not in person, I still had the possibility to participate with Veronique a few years ago at a meeting for Organic Seed Alliance in person before COVID. And that was really awesome. And I'm really happy to be here today. And I also have news that I wanted to share with you today because it's part of our process in creating relationships between the United States and North America and Europe. So we wanted to let you know that we have a project on bio-grains of the European Union that was coordinated by FIBOL, where we have on the advisory board, Michaela. And when we're doing research projects, we always have people from Organic Seed Alliance on the advisory board, and in order to have some different connections and do different things together. So yeah, that's really important what we're doing today, even if it's not in person. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Stephanie, I see that your camera is on. I just wanted to, so Veronique is not with us today, so I just wanted to give you the opportunity, nevertheless, to say hello to everyone and to say where you are, basically. Thank you, Hugo. So my name is Stephanie Kledke. I work for the Institute for Agriculture and Organic Food in France. I am based in Western France, and I work especially with issues of organic grain quality and the biodiversity associated to this. And that's it. It's almost going to be 6:30 at this point. Thank you, Stephanie. So thank you so much for these brief introductions. The way that we're going to work things out is that I have a very general question, and I'll ask several of you to prepare some short answers, but we really want to make it an interactive discussion. And I'm going to ask you to not leave me alone with this roundtable. Feel comfortable to ask questions and follow-ups because we're really here to share our experiences amongst our peers. And I'd also like to add a few comments on our experience here in Quebec at different points in time. So the first question that we'd like to ask you is, how would you describe the territorial dynamics of your network? And who is involved? How do you describe the territorial dynamics in order to give certain elements for Quebec? So basically 20 years ago, there was about 3 or 4 grants for Quebec, and now we have about 30. So there is a multiplication factor and it's being distributed throughout the entire Quebec territory for fruits and vegetables. But for cereals, we have especially the southern Quebec who do soy and corn and wheat, and the other ones that are like kind of peripheral in eastern Quebec who do certain things like oats and also the yellow peas and Saguenay, Lac Saint-Jean, and Abitibi, Témiscamingue, that are also peripheral regions where the needs for variety are going to be very different in comparison to the ones that produce cereals in southern Quebec. I'm going to speak a little bit later about the selection process and how we can overcome certain challenges to do this selection over 10 years and to make the variety available on the market. And on this, Ricardo, maybe do you want to start to see what the dynamic is in Italy. So you have certain administrative regions that finance the projects in different regions. So you are quite decentralized, I believe. No, so you're in Tuscany, right? Yes, yes. And as always, my situation and the situation in Italy is a little bit complicated to tell, but it's true. We do have some regions that are administrative and geographic, and the region that comes from the EU is managed by the regions, and sometimes also they're in a different way. There are different regions as well. So that means that it's really quite a shit show to be able to manage, just put it lightly. But other than that, we also have a network, not of people, but places. So, which means that the members of the Italian network are not people, it's other organizations that are in organic agriculture and basic people who are in the crafts and other organizations that work in towns with the citizens, and we have actors that are quite diverse who are part of this network, and that means that in the network we have a dynamic that sometimes is difficult to maintain because we have some visions and some needs that could be different and for each member. So part of our work is to talk with people, organize meetings in order to have a common base and see how things work within the network, and that's not always very easy. And then after that, for the last few years, always with the team and Veronique and others who are with us today, we have started a dynamic where we do some work. And when we started talking about this, I remember, and we started with a program about 10 years ago, and the scientists here in Italy were telling us that we were crazy, because participative research has no interest in Italy, and it's a developed country. We're not Africa with the poor Africans who are doing participative research. And I would say this was the cultural context on which we started working on, and a cultural context and scientific that is very difficult to beat. And then we had the opportunity to get some projects for research with a coordinated team, and that gave us the possibility, and I'd say the money as well, to be able to work in Italy without needing to ask money here in Italy to, say, universities or other regions, because in these times it would be difficult. It would be very difficult to see this. So and so it would be difficult with the work that's been done or others who have started working with us. And I'd say that the culture has really changed, especially since we have a lot of people with us. A lot of people in the field who are asking for the different varieties that they don't find on the market. And they are starting to tell us that we need to do some research, participative research. And we started with the cereals, and now we're with peas and lentils, but why not with other things like tomatoes. So there's a strong dynamic that comes back to from the grassroots, and that also brought the different policies and attract the universities. And at the same time, I don't know if this is the same thing in Canada and the United States and Quebec, but in the European Union had changed the words that they use in the research projects, which means that when we started, we weren't talking about participative research, and now the research is called participatory. It's almost mandatory to have different actors, and so the university academics have to look for different actors to be able to place them in there. So sometimes it's a little bit of brainwashing. Sometimes you can build some interesting relationships. So it's a process that is being done. But if I look at the parties for the last 10 years, we did a lot of progress, and sometimes even thanks to the exchanges that we had with you, which means this year, just to give you an example, we had started using in Italy SeedChange, which is a database an internet database that is also being used by Organic Seed Alliance and real life breeding, and we experienced that, and we started maybe even back home. It was a little bit interesting because we just finished a translation, the geolocalization of everything, and I do believe that in September we're going to do the beta testing, which means that the ideas need to travel amongst us, and sometimes some things that you do are very interesting for us, and sometimes vice versa. But the exchange is really going to feed us and feed our soul. Thanks, Riccardo. And you mentioned that there was a strong mobilization from people in Italy who lived in rural areas. But does everybody have their own like co-op for fruits and vegetables or cereals? Do you have like a national cooperative? So is there an organization, or how does it work? No, we're not France. We are a system that is unorganized. We're disorganized in the sense that that people who live in rural areas farmers can manage themselves. They don't have to sell it to cooperatives or anything like that. And most of the farmers who work with us, I think they manage their own things, because we work with some varieties where if you were going to sell to a cooperative, it not even in they're old varieties, populations that are quite weak in terms of protein, and they're not very good for the industrial processing, but they're great for everything else, for craft work. So that means that the harvest is already in this, so there's no real sense of managing it if you're not able to manage anything else. So that was quite clear. For cereals, if you start cultivating different varieties that attract a large part of the population, you have to create relationships with different circles and the people who do the pasta or whatnot. So that's quite clear. So thank you so much, Riccardo. And Maria, on your end, how would you describe the collective dynamic or the territorial dynamics in Spain in general, maybe, or more specifically in Catalonia or in Andalusia? Are people mobilized in your network, or can you talk to us a bit about that under this context?
I am going to make this part in English, if it's okay. I am going to present you a little bit the Spanish seed network, which in a way we could say that is the main actor in managing cultivated biodiversity as a common in the country. It was born in 1999, and it has the legal form of an association, but it's a kind of non-formal national federation of 20 local and regional seed networks distributed in all the Spanish regions. Spain, as you know, is quite a federative country. So the Spanish seed network is a representation of this spirit. The strength of the group is that the local networks are the one that develop the work with seeds on the ground, with the different stakeholders involved as producers, processors, retailers, citizenship, policymakers, among others. And the concrete work they carry on is normally seed prospection, local variety description and assessments, raise awareness actions, community seed bank development, training activities, etc. At the national level, the goal of the common work is to support and animate a platform for the exchange of know-how, working methodologies, political analysis, and the articulation with other movements of the agroecological transition at the national and the international level. For example, we are a member of the European coordination, Let's Liberate Diversity, as Rete Semi Rurali, as the friends from Belgium. So as I present before also what we are doing in at the city level, let me present you the Spanish City Food Network for Agroecology, that for me is an actor that is getting, let's say, weight in this agroecological transition from a broad perspective. The name is Red de Municipios por la Agroecología. So this city network is an association of about 18 cities from different political colors and contexts, large cities, small towns with diverse geographical and cultural contexts that work in the development of policies and sustainable and healthy local food systems. The dynamic of the members are very much linked to the size of the cities that has an impact on the availability of resources of the city council. The dynamic also depends then if they are in rural or urban context, and this is linked to the fact that residents have more or less knowledge about the agricultural context, the needs, processes, and finally, the dynamic depends on the political perspective, of course, on food systems of the local governments. So, and this has an impact on the more or less innovative food policies that they develop. So this actor is getting involved in the management of cultivated biodiversity, and as Riccardo he said before, some hours ago, we knew that we got a research and innovation European project where this organization, this network of cities, is going to work in how to include cultivated biodiversity as a transversal element in local food policies. So this is a very good news. This is a very good window of opportunity. And I hope that in the coming years, we are going to be able to strengthen the link between cities and towns and seed networks. And as a result of this, where we are going to expand the space for cultivated biodiversity, seed networks, and all the actors that are working in the dynamic use of these resources.
Merci Maria. Je me questionnais.
Thank you, Maria. So I was wondering if you also work in Andalusia. So is it because Andalusia is particularly dynamic, or it has a history that is quite particular around growing? Or so are there some territories that are more mobilized than others in Spain? No, I'm not in Andalusia. I was in Andalusia. Yes, it's been a year since I switched regions, but I would say that no. Generally speaking, no.
I
would say generally speaking, no. This perhaps unbalanced situation is much more related to the financial situation of the networks than to a social or historical context. Is the type of peasantry of networks have changed, but not the work itself. Not we're stronger on certain aspects of management of biodiversity and not so strong in others. When I went to my first conference of the OSA, I realized that Oregon and Washington and California were really the basin of seed production for the US, but also internationally. It's like 50% of the carrot seeds in the world come from Oregon. And talking to Veronique, I was explained that Bretagne and the southwest of France are the specialized regions for seed production for France. So I was curious if there was a dynamic like that in Italy or Spain. As to Spain, in the south, there's more production of garden seeds, whereas in the north, it's more fruit trees. But yes, we work with the same seeds and vegetative reproduction materials wherever we are in Spain. What about Italy? Italy is a place where seed, there's a lot of seed reproduction, multiplication. We also had a history with this, with small seed companies, but those are, that's disappearing. In the last 15 years, the small companies are being bought up by the big ones, which are not Italian. Syngenta, Chemchai, the others. They come in and buy. And the other thing, from a geographic point of view, it's a good situation to produce seeds. All the people north of Florence and Bologna, I think there's 3,000 farmers who multiply seeds. And to do that for the seed companies of all of Northern Europe, even organic. So that's the history. Now, but now it's changing with the money that's coming in. We're going to lose our local seed companies with the varieties that are non-hybrids. That is the risk. Thank you. And if I can jump in the project that we're working on today, it's been a long time. There's a work package where we're going to work on the small seed companies and how we can, what sort of business plan or business model they can have, we can develop to strengthen those small companies which are disappearing and which need help to reintroduce biodiversity into the system. So I hope that we will be able to do good work and see what are the points that need to be strengthened for those companies. Thank you, Maria. Corentin, on your side, you're a cross-border network which covers several countries. You're more based in the northern part of Europe. Can you tell us a little bit about the territorial or regional dynamic of your network and geographically in that region around the Moselle and Rhin? And there's a specific peculiar region that is specifically strong in seed production. We've existed officially since 2017 due to the European coordination, Luxembourg biodiversity that are on seed issues. And you need to understand that there wasn't a Belgian or Luxembourg network for seeds, and there was a missing piece in the European picture, and that's how we got support to start our project. And our region, unlike Spain or France or Italy, is no longer at all a seed production region. We became specialists in potatoes for Europe. That's the big thing here. But historically, there was Sème, a seed producer, a company around that created in 1999. That was our pioneer seed company, which reintroduced certain varieties, but for individuals, not gardeners, not for farmers so much. That is the first aspect about our context. And now I'm going to talk about several different scales. First of all, the global cross-border scale. Belgium, as you know, is a small country, and Luxembourg is even smaller. So in 3 hours, I can cross my country. I can drive across my country, just to give you an idea. But there's an agreement between Luxembourg and Belgium, as well as northern France. We have this region that we've created. And we have, you could say, the same political culture as well. Since we're small, whether we like each other or not, we're going to have to work together. That's very typical, very classic in the Belgian case, but it's true across the three countries with 3 different languages. But when we created the network, one of the important things we decided on was that plant biodiversity and human diversity are important. In our network, we have a number of countries represented, and we also have professionals, amateurs, people who plant field crops, people who plant market crops. And we also have an organization, Bio-Wallonie, in the Wallon region, the French-speaking region of France, that is their organic sector association, which has also joined us. So we're trying to find alliances. The other thing, speaking of alliances, since we're near Brussels, we've got some lawyers who are working on seed issues as well. And so they help us out as well, because we don't have the legal knowledge or the ability or the capacity to follow how things are moving in the courts. And the role of our network is an exchange of knowledge and savoir-faire or know-how. And it is also, as in Italy, it is a network of organizations, not individuals. That's important. The other thing is we're following these legislative issues, and we're also talking about how we can communicate seed issues to the population. So for the last year, now we're talking about that we're saying that we're the epicenter of the of Belgian seed production, because we have 2 seed companies and 1 multiplier. But we're talking about, there's a natural park that's there, a national park, and so there's something that's sort of getting underway here. And we said, well, it's great to work on biodiversity, but it's still it's basically just a club of people who know the issues. So how can we make this more visible to the general public? I'm working on the Corcos initiative. I've been doing that in the context of my thesis, and I drew on their experience. I said, how can we communicate on seed issues to the general public? Can we get funding, for example, through our alliances to do that? And so we're developing 2 components. One has to do with grains, and the other one is market crops. And so they're 2 separate things. So it's all both taking place in the same region, but we'll be able to replicate these or expand them. From grain to bread is the first one. We have some bakers. They don't have bakeries anymore, but they have drop-off points where they sell bakery goods directly. So this is a rather organic vision of the living world, and their question has to do with grains. And so we're setting up a whole sector here. There's a organic farmer who is doing trials of varieties, land races, and also there's also trials at the Farm Research Center. So there's a number of things underway here, and this also enables us to put together researchers and practitioners in the same area. They're going to build a mill, and we've found some funders. We're looking for funders to finance the mill, so that the bread, the final product, can tell the whole story of the seeds that led to it. Same thing for market farmers, but here in the region, we've got quite a lot of organic farmers. Sometimes they're 5 kilometers apart, but they don't know each other. And so that was the first thing, is 2 different ways to create micro networks. So we have a big issue in terms of seed companies. We have Sème, that's one of them, which has just been bought by 3 people who are not at all from our sector. They're not one of us, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and we'll see what happens. But there's a lot of money on the table. So that is something we've been seeing also, is that the pioneers who broke through, now when it comes to the transition, they need to get their money back. But they do want to set up a positive dynamic, so they're welcome in our network. But what we have to look at what these seed companies essentially do is buying and selling. They're resellers. They don't produce, because they don't produce a lot. They have 700 varieties for sale, but they get them from somewhere else. It's 20 varieties that really represent most of their profits, now carrots and things like that. So the issue with them is to say they can't start funding a network of multipliers, people who grow the seeds out. We're going to need training as well. So those are projects, but they're not. We don't have the money for that yet, and the seed company can't do it either. So it's very small, but because it's small, it's a little bit. It's pretty flexible. People know each other. But also the seed world is also a world of conflict, interpersonal conflict on different political and economic issues. We have seen that too. The second issue is to increase the number of multipliers. That's important if we're talking about territorial or regional resilience. And that is why we developed this sector, or this project, these 2 projects, the bakery one, or the bread one, and then in Luxembourg, what's going on there? We have Franck Cadal, who has been working on marketing seeds to professionals, but with legal issues that they have to resolve with the government. And our way of reaching the general public is through these 2 projects, and we can go to Quebec and tell you, and maybe see if we can get some of this going there too. I see the time is flying, so if there's no comments, we've heard. If we have no other comments from our 3 panelists. You're a member of the cooperative for how does Marie-Claude, how does this all work in Quebec? My segment of the presentation followed. It has a lot to do with Corentin. It's very similar to what I'm doing here as a producer. When we're talking about regional dynamics, that includes several actors. from different levels, at different scales. In Quebec, we're in a specific geographical context because we're a very large province, and the population density is quite low compared to the European countries. When you're talking about regional dynamics, you can think of actors like gardeners, seed guardians, vegetable growers, and in Quebec, all of those actors are coordinated by Sème l'Avenir, that is our group, which plays a very important role in terms of networking individuals, seed companies, market farmers, to try to create a dynamic that will meet the needs of everyone and that can offer training tools as well. In Quebec, we're in we have a very short season and with a wet fall. So it's a province that is not well adapted to seed production as compared with the US Northwest, or BC. So producing seeds, we can only produce seeds for a handful of vegetables. That makes the context difficult for seed companies that would like to increase their offering to more than individuals. So to be able to sell to market gardeners. There's a lot of constraints there, and I can tell you about that at greater length. If you're talking about the dynamics between seed companies and individuals, in Quebec, we have seed fairs every weekend, or seedy Saturdays, they're known as in English, from January to April. These are events that are extremely important for building the seed sector in Quebec. These events gather together about 15 seed companies that sell their products to gardeners. It's an opportunity for them to make sales, but it's also an opportunity to network and take the pulse of gardeners' needs and interests, new trends and patterns. And so these are really, really valuable events. And these events were deeply affected, of course, by the pandemic. So those events are not been happening, and that is greatly affecting the wealth of our network, or the value of our network. It is an event where, yes, you can network among seed companies and gardeners, but it's also an event where seed companies can network among themselves, retailers that is, and target our needs for networking, training, and so forth. Those events, these CD Saturdays, were deeply missed this year and last year as well, in terms of the dynamic of our network.
When we talk about dynamics, there's dynamics between these companies and then the ones from the producers, as well as the makers. So a lot of things there's another tendency to be able to get to the provisions from the local retailers. So, for example, there's the fact that we don't offer any hybrid grains that we ask for from these producers. So there's also some limitations in terms of the quality, in the sense that these producers are used to a certain uniformity or consistency in terms of the size of the grains or the seeds and all this, because these ones are going to be used in different calibrated growing mechanisms, and so the questions of volume as well. So despite the fact that we are about 20 or 30 companies to provide seeds, we can't provide it for everyone because we don't have enough. So there are some constraints in terms of volume, and there's also some constraints in terms of selection, because these companies will not have some populations of thousands of individuals to choose from. And this becomes quite interesting to offer different partnerships between the different companies and as well as these producers in order to allow access to the population, so to the company and the multiplier. So these populations will be on these farms, and therefore, and I think there's a lot of different opportunities of networking between these different companies to produce and makers. So I think that it's quite at an embryonic stage at this point. For example, I'm gonna talk about the variety that was given by M Highway that is not available this year. And this is a variety of rutabaga that is not that is really appreciated by the producers, but it's not available this year. So if I can talk to you a bit about the example of yellow rutabaga had about 150 individuals in a farm, and then I was able to reproduce it on my own site, and then in order to then distribute it to the producers. But that is just one example amongst hundreds of different varieties. So there's a lot of potential there when we're talking about giving more vigor finally to the different current purchases for producers from producers, and if they're finally quite warm to get things locally, maybe we can think about including them in terms of the production. So that is still quite at an embryonic stage as well, but we think to ourselves that finally, when it comes down to it, and maybe they can produce maybe they can concentrate on one or two varieties and produce different seeds, and then maybe move on to something more on a bulk level, so that this could be sent to a place that is more centralized, a place that would take care of the final clean, and that the company would take care of the distribution between the different farms. And it's like I said, very embryonic, but at the basis, I think it's going to go through education. So it's really to look at the different schools in management and to give them the necessary awareness and to offer in their school programs some training on production in the different contexts. And also my business this year is going to have a showroom, and we hope that we can invite some groups of schools to be able to observe how we could integrate this type of production and what it looks like finally at a commercial level. So I'm going to stop there. And no, thank you so much, Marie-Claude. I think that you've really opened up the second part of our discussion, which is great, and that is how we choose and how can we find some economic outlets to be able to generate some funds that are ideally be invested in research and development and different classes. So I'd also add another comment is that Quebec is also a big producer of potatoes. So we do have in the North Shore of Quebec, there is a group that's devoted in potatoes. So it's we help them, but we also have a lot of garlic and potatoes. It's cultures that are produced asexually. So it's a dynamic that is quite different in terms of the management of illnesses and whatnot. But this is really products that are they're stars. We have institutional framework that is able to support this. So I do believe that Marie-Claude did a good job by indicating what are our limitations, our territorial ones, or environmental ones in Quebec. So we can, in terms of commercial quality, we can do some certificate. We can do crucifers. We can do and also fruits and vegetables and green vegetables and corn. But each one of these species will have some different constraints in terms of isolation, and I think that it'll be interesting to talk about this type of networking, so that with the producers, they can do other selections in the large parcels, and so they can really select the best individuals and involve them in the production. So I was, and I propose that we head over to that second question, which is finally, we can give examples maybe of different economic viability in terms of, and what would happen in terms of this participant selection. And I could give you a brief example actually, and it's this type of example is kind of what motivated me to go and get some help at the European network, and I was talking about corn, and we had a lot of organic producers in Quebec who wanted to develop, and they had production, and they had some contamination in their corn, and they weren't able to find any varieties that had good performance and so they launched into a program of participative selection, completely self-managed, and after 5 years, 6-7 years of selections, they weren't satisfied with the performance of their culture. So which means that they actually developed an agreement. They continued their different varieties, and they assessed different varieties from Satzboom, from an Austrian group that do hybrid organic options without any contaminants, and because there's no germs in these types of germs in Austria, and after 4 or 5 years of selections, they tried to vary this in order to have a commercial agreement with this company in Austria. And I think it's important to talk about the selection processes that fail because we are unable to have enough, or we're unable to convince the producers that they were able to do these varieties. And same thing, we have another one for wheat and oats, and we started the selection process in 2013, but now it's almost 10 years later. And what we notice is that the agriculturists that started participating with us, they went and they're retiring. So these selection processes fall to the wayside because the producer is unable to convince those who have a lot of things to manage on their farms to be able to continue the selection of their population. And there's also an essential time, which is the multiplication. So there's a point when it's too big to be able to do it manually, too small to do it through a different method or a greenhouse. So we need a multiplication of cereal system that is not mechanic or not manual. So that's a challenge. And that was just to give a few bits of context in terms of the cereals that are produced in Quebec. Now I have Marie-Claude, who had already started talking about the different economic worries and getting the necessary seeds for professionals. And there's some people who briefly mentioned it. Riccardo, on your end, you had talked about the dynamics of this small company that is being purchased by a larger company. And in terms of cereal, tomatoes, and all this. So are there success stories coming in with volumes and a little quality to be able to and for those who have to do this type of selection? Well, I would say yes. To answer your question, especially for cereals, and the other cases, it's a little bit more difficult. Like so for vegetable patches, it's different. It's different. Where it's true that even for more industrial things, it's going to be difficult to be because there's in Italy bioindustrial, they always use hybrids, and so that always comes back to this in Northern Europe. So they're Italian genetics, but in terms of cereal, the situation is different. At least back home, we sell a different industrial agriculture and the prices to pay, and it's not a lot of money that comes in from the European Union. And there's some professionals that are asking for different seeds, and in order to also change markets and products. And we see this for the last 2-3 years, I believe. And I think that with our work, we also managed to have farmers who started working with us, and they're also seed producers. So they're still farmers, but they also sell a quantity of seeds quite large to the local population. And for us, that was quite the success because it's the first time that we were able to have this certified and organic and not homogeneous, but stable, which is a doctrine that we tried and that still validated things on a conventional level. And but now we've noticed that it's not easy, which means that we have issues. The first one is and so the markets that are not very large. So it's in order to do everything. So where we have a population with a large university who arrived about 20 years ago, and now we it's a call for the sister the sister farms. So those are the ones that are in geographic situations where we shared the region into 5 geographic zones in terms of agrometeorology, and then after that the other ones are in the same region as the sister plant. So that means that the surface area isn't really the same service that is conventional, but we're talking about the surfaces that maybe aren't that small, but not as big either. So that means that it's a market that can work for small groups that also do other things. And what we're thinking or imagining is that we should have to have this reservation. So not think only of the selling of this as something that is being done, but also to the technical help. Everything that accompanies all that. And it's been years that we've believed that, and we haven't yet found a solution, but facing the challenges but how can we reinvent this and not be only in the business, but in the production and sale, but others as well. Thank you, Riccardo. I wasn't familiar with this approach where there was like a sister farm and all this stuff, or a mother farm, and for agrometeorological methods that are similar. So I'm learning a lot, and actually I'm surprised that in Italy we're unable to give provisions to the producers, because Italy has such a history and a heritage and a terroir, and you also have some reserved appellations, and with in terms of radicchio and tomatoes that we are not reaching the volumes to be able to provide for everyone. Well, it depends. So tomatoes, if we take the tomato from Napoli, San Marzano, it's very well known to make sauces. Now it's a hybrid, but it hardly exists, the variety. So as opposed to 20 years ago, it's a hybrid, and the appellation, so they say you have to use the hybrid one and not the local one. Oh yeah? What? Because that's the region. It's the region. And even other appellations d'origine, I don't know, some examples like for lentils. Back home, I think we have some areas where we start these different catalogs with the different local varieties, and between 35 and 40 varieties. So a lot of them are part of these appellations d'origine contrôlée, and we did some different groups. And if you look at this, are doing why? Because it's more productive. We make more, and the citizens, they don't know the local variety, so they keep the name, because the name is always something that is something you have to keep, because people know the casalucho lentil, for example. But then after that, the genetics change, and the variety isn't the same anymore. So that's when there's a lot of money. So when there's a lot of money, we do that. When there's a lot less, then there's a lot of other people who keep the local variety. So and there's small regions where there's small surfaces, not a lot of market. Yeah, when we think about the different economic opportunities for the local groups, then that's what we notice, is that since there's a whole bunch of hybrids, and that it's very difficult to compete with the hybrids, culturally speaking or economically speaking. But on the other hand, if there are some cultures where there's no hybrids, so for example, for peas or rutabaga, there's no hybrid. So we believe that it's an agriculture where there's no, also in lettuces either. So we think that in the cultures where there's no hybrid and there's not this unfavorable comparison, that we can be able to get and everything. But Riccardo, you also have a selection product for an evolution for pomodoro for tomatoes. How do I get those seeds? We'll send it to you. Oh, thank you. Okay, that's not hard. So we started about 10 years ago with Frédéric and all this, and then we continued developing it. And yeah, we can send it to you. If someone's interested, you can also write to us. And we've written a scientific paper on the population of wheat, and then we've prepared another one on tomatoes. So we can share that with you. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to let others speak now. So, and maybe we'll come back to the whole question of wheat and soy and for everything. So Stephanie, I see you have your hand up. Yes, I wanted to go back as to what Riccardo was saying in terms of, let's say, the competitive market for hybrids in terms of the population. And what I observed quite clearly in France, and I hope it's, I'm wondering if it's the same thing in Italy and Spain. Our colleagues can clarify. It's whether it's for cereals or for fruits and vegetables, those who have different varieties of population and whatnot. These are, generally speaking, in the majority, they're producers who are going to do direct sales, or for cereals, they'll go up to the processed product. So economically up to the very end for the product. And these are, generally speaking, this is what's interesting in England. In England, we can talk a little bit more about that too, but that is an exception because there is also some big producers who are in a cooperative and who work with different subpopulations. But in terms of the national level, with producers who are in direct sales or planting the cereals, and they actually end up doing well economically speaking. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So I thought that, yes, it was quite interesting because there's never a rupture in the transfer of knowledge between the different generations. And that was really particular, a particular aspect of it. And given that you produced a winter cabbage for parts of Europe, you have populations that are extremely large on which you can do some selections, which means that we have an improvement of the performance.
Maria? Non. Bon, est-ce que Maria ou Corentin veut intervenir sur...
Maria or Corentin, would you like to answer the question of how we can work to best advantage? You've identified a problem on which you're going to put your energy into. So these are varieties that you think the consumers will accept. I think these are very down-to-earth strategies to increase the access of producers, vegetable producers, to land races. We'll take 4 or 5 varieties that will then bring in the rest, and on which vegetable producers or people who sell processed products from those vegetables can differentiate themselves. They're organic, but they also are differentiated because these are land races, and so they can favor biodiversity, agrobiodiversity. Most people don't know this. They're interested in it, but they haven't really learned about it. And we took land races that had local names. So there's big debates. Is the wee red onion really the same original source of the red onion? Well, it's getting around and it's evolving, and we don't want to be dogmatic about the sources of our germplasm. We have to provide for the living evolution. There's another non-organic vegetable producer who wants to tear all this down, and we'll see how this evolves. But there you go, humans, beings. But that's the goal. We want it to be funded by the region, and the person in the government didn't understand what we were trying to do. So we had to explain to them the use, the value of doing this in terms of biodiversity, and that biodiversity isn't just birds. It's also, there's actual agrobiodiversity. There's a real political and cultural hegemony set of issues there. So he understood that it's an innovation for purposes of differentiation. Well, but our issue is to get market farmers to come to the window and to the showcase. And then I've got 4 or 5 who have said, yeah, I'll do some tests. And we'll see how that works with your consumers, if they like the product. And I'm not going to give you tables, charts, and apps that you're going to have to fill out in order for this. No, I'm just trusting the universe to send me back the results. That's our wager, and we'll see if it works. If it does, then we'll keep on replicating it. That is based on Colcos. I don't know if you want me to talk about Colcos or not. How is the Colcos experience relevant to you? Colcos said, well, we like what we're doing, all the selection, but how are we going to get this to market? How can we make this economically profitable? And so there was a whole debate. I can spare you the details within the farm seed network. So and the Carrefour, which is a supermarket, showed up, and Colcos, they said, we're interested. Colcos said something, which is that we have to hear. She said, we're going to, with them, because to be sure that they are staying on, we're going to keep them honest. Otherwise, they're going to set up their own brand, and they'll be selling whatever they want. But in exchange, our people are going to have to be remunerated, and so there's going to have to be a financial agreement. And that is called légumes interdits, prohibited vegetables. And that was the position in Colcos. 2000s, the question of land races was pretty well unknown. And then gradually it emerged. And you can no longer, or heritage varieties. Now there's certain tolerances, but there's no recognition. So I think these are important steps that we're making. And our recognition, we said, will come from the consumer. We have to go to a place which has a strike force that no one else has, to reach those folks so that they can buy vegetables produced from land races. And people will say, you know, you've sold your soul to the devil, but I won't get into the whole debate. But there was an interpersonal relationship between the buyer at Carrefour and the other person. These were there was a debate around a certain disease in cabbage, and they had they basically had a good deal, although they had a good relationship. But when one of them left, the deal fell. The deal collapsed. And Switzerland, has another group, and we wanted to have a meeting. Well, we're just going to have to wait until we can get that done. But basically, that is the experience of Colcos when it comes to the market. What about the Swiss today? They speak French. Why aren't they here today? That's our mistake. We didn't put them on the panel. We've got 20 minutes left. For those who are wondering about Colcos, it is a Bretagne cooperative, and Carrefour, of course, is a great big French supermarket. So the question was this: we would watch this partnership develop, and it was it led to quite a bit of debate among the French, because for some people there's different perspectives on it. Now, Maria, we've got 15 minutes left, and we're only at our second question, so let's stick to that. In your network, you did a project of characterization of heritage wheats, tomatoes, and did you find candidate varieties of these species that you were able to grow out, improve their quality, and make them available to farmers? That is my specific question for you, but obviously you can speak about, in general, about how you have been taking best advantage of the whole question of marketing. I'll do my best. Putting you on the spot here a bit, but I wanted to add a few ideas to what Riccardo was saying. In grains and Spanish varieties, it's less developed than the gardening aspect. There's a big problem. There's missing infrastructure. I think that's true in other countries as well. Missing combines, storage sites. How can you manage small quantities that are growing but are still small, of different varieties? How can we set up the logistics to send various quantities of different varieties of wheat to the farm, and to the farm, from the farm to the bakery? And that takes a lot of thinking, because there's a whole big bottleneck in our case. And as you said, we did this project for registration of local varieties. We characterized a certain number, I think 15 varieties of wheat. And the problem was not that work. It was mainly the logistics. In addition, there's another problem of infrastructure, which is that to put grain varieties on the market, they have to be certified, it has to be certified seed. not necessarily organic. It's related to seed quality. And for that, you need infrastructure. So these three problems related to logistics and infrastructure make it so that even though the peasants are often very committed, as Stephanie was saying, to production and processing of grains, it's quite difficult to do. And if you think of conventional grain, there's a scale problem. In Andalusia, we're talking about very large acreages, at least in the Spanish context. They're very big. 100 hectares of wheat, that's big for Spain. And today, you simply can't manage that with local varieties. So we have to think about what changes would be necessary in order for these conventional growers to do it, given in terms of their actions, their techniques, their know-how, and also which products they can introduce into the farm so they can work with local varieties. All of those things have to be solved in order to be able to make that entrance into conventional. Also, there's a whole question of the geographical region Riccardo was talking about. We want to try to about developing tomatoes. Farmers are using hybrids. And I was thinking of basically the reverse situation in beans in Catalonia. There's a land race that is quite broad, but you have to use a very specific ecotype in order to get into the market. And in a geographical area that is very small. So it means that farmers who use the whole population, the broad population elsewhere, are not allowed to use that name of that bean. That problem we find with other crops as well in Spain. I'm thinking of a zucchini in Tenerife, the island of Tenerife. That's not a controlled designation, but a brand where a cooperative registered a brand, Bubanco, a local variety, in order to sell hybrid zucchini. Kind of piracy of origin names, which we see throughout Europe. So all of this work about characterization of varieties, whether we were able to market them once we've characterized them, that was the question. And yes. As to tomatoes, I think it's about 25 varieties which were already on the market. But informal markets, both the seeds and the tomatoes. In the case of wheat, no, the case of wheat is very different. There were farmers who were saving wheat, and there were varieties that we found that we had, and after 50 years of reproduction, replication, we were able to do a pretty good description, morphological description. But thank you, Maria. That is very relevant. A number of comments here. It's very new for me, this whole question of controlled designations, and I'm not really aware of all the specifications and the restrictions, and that becomes another hurdle for marketing. Not so. You mentioned this company that created a brand, and I had indicated in the chat similar work that was done in the US with Cursa. And it's not a variety, it's a brand. I think there's something to be done there. We need a trademark, have a trademark, rather than getting bogged down in all these regulatory issues and registration and so forth. In Quebec, we have the same issue. You have to have certified seed. In other words, quality seed. So doubly certified seed for their quality and for organic are non-existent or almost non-existent. Harvest insurance is also associated with certified seed. So if I produce my own, if I use my own seed, then I won't be insured. That's crop insurance. And talking in my discussion with people who grow out heritage varieties, they're talking about 200 kilograms. Once you have 200 kilograms of seed, you can start going into commercial work, 2 to 20, 20 to 200, but it can take 3 years, but that is how long it takes. That's economic. We only have a few minutes left. And instead of hastening or rushing to the conclusion, why don't we simply close this discussion more calmly? I would suggest a last go around, 2 minutes each. Say whether you've learned anything, whether there are any issues that you want to get further into in the future, and basically to share the pleasure of having been together today. Marie-Claude, why don't you go first? For me, the thing I've been thinking about the most is the question of marketing. And I very much appreciated Corentin's comments about the 5 vegetables that they're working with. Or that they're prioritizing. And I think we have to think about a way of making seeds more sexy, if you will, more attractive for local seeds or land races, for attractive for market gardeners. And we may need a centralized platform, but that will require funding. But we're going to need somebody who coordinates that, who has the time and the interest to get involved, but it was going to need funding in order to support that person. So many more questions than we have answers, right? When we're talking about marketing at a local scale, people will do their own drawings. It's a level of aesthetics there. And when I found Row 7 company in the people in the US know, I said, they're slick. They've got nice pictures. It's cool. They've clearly done their marketing homework, which goes beyond. Maybe they're in their demographic, but the seeds cost more also. There's not a lot of seeds in each packet. And so they're trying to, to attract a certain clientele. And I see that Michaela has just just indicated the link to the culinary breeding network. Same thing, they work with good photographers and artists to create a proper signature, graphic signature that and the packaging plays a big role in selling. So I think we have to deal with marketing people to help us to put out to get out of that sort of quaintness, that quaint approach to marketing. Now, Riccardo, for the last comments.
Oui, merci, Hugo.
Thank you, Hugo. So for my comment, I wanted to answer the question that you asked at the first in the discussion that happened with Veronique when you're preparing today's conference, because it's something that with Veronique, we've been talking about for a few years now, which is the sustainability of what we do. So we started with the research projects, and we're trying to see what's going on in the Europeans. So we need public money to be able to do our work. But the reflections that we did on which it would be great to have a meeting is that we need to end up to providing to the citizens. We should imagine that we're going to tell the citizens not only the number of products or the fact that it's organic or whatnot, but that and what's behind, but that behind that there is a research history and a rural and social innovation. And we have to start telling citizens that doing things differently, local varieties, old varieties, is not just folkloric. But behind that, there's a whole bunch of work, a whole bunch of hard work that isn't recognized by the public's money, and that if they have life to create another agriculture, they have to support that kind of work. So we have to start saying it, because I don't know back home, but with us in Italy, if we're talking about agricultural research and citizens and that, they don't know very much about that. So they have no idea what it is to have to do agricultural research. So there's a lot of work to be able to tell that to the citizens and to do that, and to be able to find the necessary supports for rural and participative work, and that's the future, right? There's a sensitivity in terms of the 4 policies for the European Union, and there's a possibility around that. But how are we going to transform this towards the sense of how that work is evolving? Marianne, did you have some last comments? Yes, I shared with you some of my material that we've done about two years ago, because yeah, we went from the idea that in Spain we needed to explore the different participative local varieties, and for this first exploration we did this proposal, and we can see the specificities. And the idea wasn't to do this 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 certification and whatnot. It was more glitch, but we wanted to introduce the whole question of not the right of intellectual property and exchanges and all this. So and different varieties that are happening to be able to go forward. And we have a relationship with the local culture and whatnot. So we did this first proposal that we needed to develop it in the Spanish context. And another thing and is in terms of aesthetics. We need to do things that are nice and that it's good to have. And just to conclude, it's kind of half joking way. There's a and there's an expression that said something like, in this world, there was people who are too sensitive need to have a little bit of aesthetics in their lives, and that's basically it. So thanks. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, firstly, I'd like to thank multilingualism, because I thought it was a lot easier for me to express things in my own mother tongue, and I thought that's something that we need to keep, and that also allows to have producers who don't specifically speak English. I don't say all this because I don't speak English very well, I'm just saying it. So just a big thank you for that. And I think that we do have some meetings, probably I hope in person too in the future. And I hope that we're going to do an exchange with Quebec with some public financing. And the other thing that is that it's what Riccardo was saying. It's the whole education sense and the popular education. We're going to really work to have a positive thing, and not like, oh, we're just a little guys. No, and there's the big bad the guys there that have all of their different machines and all that. Even though we still have to be careful with that, we can also say that we have a positive narrative that is quite resilient that we can do in terms of all of the things that are happening in the world. And that's why I was talking about having this this conference with a lot of different body gestures. It's been twice now that Marie-Claude and I have gone to Oregon, so we would love to go and visit you very soon. So Stephanie, did you want to make a comment just to conclude? No, I think everything's been said. So I'm joining everyone in the thank yous for the for the organization, the interpretation. It's super important to have the interpretation, and I've learned a lot of things. So that's great. And there is a documentation project that's been done in the proceedings for the conference, and it's available in French and in English, and we've worked a lot on it. So I'd invite you to share that amongst you to be able to share that experience or those experiences. And I also wanted to thank Esteban, Peter, and the other interpreters. Thank you so much for your work, and it's been really appreciated. I really appreciate also that Riccardo, Maria, that you spoke in French with us. That's really appreciated, even though it's not your mother tongue. And any other comments on how the session was for? So, Michaela, did you want to share a closing remark on how everything was for you?
Just echoing everybody else's sentiment. I would love hearing all of the languages, and I know many of you, and I've touched some of your work, and it's always so informative to hear. We're all working toward the same end goals, but we all have to adapt our work to our local context. And so, yeah, very grateful. Next up at 11 o'clock, top of the hour, well, not 11 o'clock for all of you. Some of you are ready to head to the pub or dinner. But we do have a feedback session for the organizers. There will be an evaluation later as well. And then the closing ceremony, I think, is going to be very impactful. So I welcome you, even if you are in the pub, tune in for the closing ceremony. Have a good night.